Hey everyone, welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. Today we're going to be going over Klee, giving you guys a quick overview of where she's strong in the game, how to build her, team comps, and synergies. So first, why don't we just get started right away and start talking about her talents. So Kaboom is her normal attack, and then here she's going to perform up to 3 explosive pyro AoE attacks, and her charge attack consumes a certain amount of stamina and deals pyro damage to enemies after a short casting time. Plunging attack, she gathers the power of pyro, and then plunges towards the ground from midair, dealing AoE pyro damage again. This is all pretty standard. I mean, most characters, especially catalyst users, will have elemental enhanced attacks, and they're typically going to be AoE as well, so this is par for the course. Her elemental skill, Jumpy Dumpty, is tons of boom bang fun, and when thrown, Jumpy Dumpty bounces 3 times, igniting and dealing pyro AoE damage with every bounce. On the 3rd bounce, the bomb splits into mines, which explode upon contact with enemies or after a short period of time. The mines stay on the ground for 15 seconds, and the cooldown is 20 seconds per charge, because she starts with 2 charges of this ability. Her elemental burst will summon sparks and splash to attack nearby enemies, dealing AoE pyro damage, and we're going to show you what all of these skills look like later. This is a little bit confusing just reading out, but it'll make a lot more sense once you see it. She has 3 passive talents as well, the first unlocked at Ascension 1, and this is whenever she uses her E or normal attacks, Klee has a 50% chance to obtain an explosive spark. This explosive spark is consumed by the next charge attack, which makes it cost no stamina and deals 50% increased damage. She also gets Sparkling Burst at Ascension 4, which is when a charge attack results in a crit, all party members gain 2 elemental energy, which is pretty nice. Finally, there is her Overworld passive, which is All of My Treasures. This one displays the location of nearby resources unique to Mondstadt on the minimap. So now, let's get started talking about her effectiveness in the early and mid game. Out of 10, we would give her an 8. So at this point, Genshin has been out for about a month now, and we've seen some people like Hao blaze through this game. Others, like myself, are taking it a bit more casually. And so before we get started with this section, I want to make it clear that the effectiveness of Klee, or any character for that matter, will vary greatly depending on what resources you have available for her and your world level. For the purposes of this video, we'll be assuming a fresh account starting with a lucky Klee pull, rather than a veteran account pulling her later in progression stages. With that having been said, Klee's role in the early mid-game is pretty flexible. She has enough damage that she could be your primary carry, while her talents, without constellations, are more geared towards swapping her in and out for burst and elemental reactions. If you're sitting at world level 1 or 2, you're going to be fine playing her however you want, since the enemies and content likely won't be hard enough to highlight her weaknesses. Taking a look at her kit and just watching her gameplay, you can get a pretty good idea of what she excels at. Her elemental skill has 2 charges, and this is an amazing AoE pyro option with 3 bounces and the final explosion into a mini minefield. It's also important to note this little tip when playing Klee. The mines will stay on the ground for 15 seconds, or until an enemy triggers them. The cooldown for 1 charge of her E is 20 seconds. So the most efficient way to keep pyro status on enemies is to hold off on using your E until you've recovered another charge. So you'll only have 5-second downtime between pyro activations. This idea is geared more towards a DPS Klee build, or if you're running co-op and your friend can easily trigger elemental reactions. Even in the case of using Klee as a burst and swap character, you'd still want to be careful with the timing of your E's and not stack them, unless you want to wait 40 seconds for her to become useful again. Her Ascension 1 talent upgrade, Pounding Surprise, is, as the name suggests, quite a pounding surprise for your enemies. When her basic attack or E do damage, there's a 50% chance her next charge attack costs no stamina and does 50% more damage. This talent can work for both Klee builds, as you'll constantly be attacking and thus proccing this talent for DPS Klee. And for burst Klee, you can just E or auto once or twice to see if it triggers, and then charge attack and then swap her out for some extra damage. Klee's elemental burst, Sparks and Splash, is one of the more visually appealing skills in the game in my opinion. The lasers and cute little, I don't know what they're called, sparks, are really cool to look at floating around and auto-targeting enemies while Klee is still out and about doing her thing. This is just another part of Klee's kit that makes her so good for keeping enemies pyroed, since the duration of the skill is 10 seconds and the CD is 15 seconds. So you could potentially have 5-second downtime if you have enough energy regen. Aside from combat skills, Klee also has a talent that lets her show Mondstadt exclusive resources on the minimap. So this is great for gathering certain materials if you're into exploring and you want things like Philanemo mushrooms or wolf hooks. Some build recommendations for the early game? It really depends on how you want to play her or what characters you have to support her. Naturally, if you have more support focused roster, then Klee will default into being your main carry, then something like Gambler or Martial Artist artifact sets would be good. Gambler essentially will give you a 15-second CD on her E instead of 20 seconds, assuming you can keep killing enemies in time, and Martial Artist 4-piece set gives a 25% damage buff for 8 seconds after using an elemental skill. So combined with Klee's charges on her E, you can get a strong 16-second burst off at the start, and then 8-second buff every 20 seconds following that. If you're looking to play Klee as a secondary damage dealer or burst, then you could still go Martial Artist, just keep her out for at least 8 seconds to take advantage of that passive. Otherwise, you can go Resolution of Sojourner and hope those spark charge attacks crit for chunky damage. For weapons, if we keep it limited to 3 stars, then the best option would probably be Twin Nephrite or Amber Catalyst. Really, the more important thing here would be to have another Catalyst user on the team like Barbara or Mona with Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers for the 24% attack swap-in buff to Klee. If we want to bring in some 4-star weapons, then MAPPA MARE, I'm not sure if that's how you say it, and Solar Pearl are probably your best bets. MAPPA MARE is craftable, so it's definitely more accessible than the Solar Pearl that comes through Battle Pass, which I believe limits you to 1 copy. MAPPA MARE is also going to be better for burst and swap Klees, while Pearl will be more suited for DPS Klee, since you'll want to be alternating between elemental skill and auto attacks for the damage buffs. If we transition into late game Klee, her role is probably still going to be the same and she can fulfill both main carry and burst support roles, but in my opinion, it probably starts leaning more towards the burst category due to her lack of defensive utility and relatively slow attack speed. Pyro is still a great element for tagging bosses with, since his elemental reactions are all pretty useful for increasing damage, either directly or indirectly. This is still the case in domain style content as well, but now with the added benefit that Klee has so much AoE, and the charges mean she could keep Pyro on consistently in co-op, or between swaps if running solo. Despite Klee having so much AoE, and sounding like she belongs in mob rush content, she also does well versus bosses for one main reason. Her ult summons a lot of sparks to shoot lasers, and typically you'll see these lasers fire at different enemies because, well, there's just a lot of enemies around. However, in boss fights, all the lasers will be focused on one single enemy and do massive damage. Having the flexibility between focusing single target damage and also being able to AoE as needed is a huge plus that I think people might be sleeping on with Klee. Our late game build recommendations? As far as artifacts goes, Crimson Wish of Flames is hard to beat with the 15% pyro damage buff at 2 set and the damage buff to the 2 set effect and elemental reactions at 4 set. Honestly, a really insane set for pyro catalyst users, and Klee is the only one at the moment, considering all of her damage is going to be pyro damage. No other set really comes close to Crimson Witch, but one that might have potential at 4 pieces is the LAVAWALKER set, where damage is increased to burning and pyro enemies by 35%. The 2 set bonus here is Pyro Res, which can be useful, but probably not what you're looking for with a character like Klee. As far as weapons goes, let's focus on the 5 stars here. Law's Prayer to the Sacred Winds is the definitive winner. Although base attack is a little bit lower than Skyward Atlas, the passive actually works really well with Klee's timings. At rank 1, it's 8% elemental damage bonus every 4 seconds with a max of 4 stacks. So that's going to be 32% damage, and it lasts until you die or swap out. So what happens is you hit max stacks at 16 seconds, Klee's E cooldown is 20 seconds, and her ult at Constellation 4 does a 555% AoE burst when you swap out. The idea here would be to E first and then use autos to build stacks for 16 seconds, by which point you should be close to a second E coming back up. You ult, throw out E again, both of these should have the full buff, and then after 8 or 9 seconds before your ult runs out, you swap out for the 555% AoE burst, and when you rotate back in, you can build energy through the first 16 seconds stacking the buff, and repeat. Now that's obviously an ideal scenario, and things might not always pan out that way, but it's fun to think about the damage potential with a maxed out Klee. So finally, overall free-to-play value. We're gonna have to give her a 5 out of 10 here. It's hard to rate any 5-star character high on a free-to-play value basis, so there she is at a 5. Unless there's some 5-star that can literally carry and perform every role like a super gene, characters that are locked behind gacha and exceedingly low rates are going to be hard to make it above 5. Klee is definitely very good, don't get me wrong, but only if you have her, and we should all know by now how fickle Genshin rates can be. I was debating giving Klee a 6 here because I do think that she has a lot of potential in late game content and is good even without constellations, but she has to compete with existing 5-stars like Venti and Diluc, and considering how scarce resources become later on in the game, it might be hard to build her out even if you have her. Our final recommendation: if you don't have a 5-star or strong carry, then Klee is probably a more efficient pull for you. Otherwise, she's still strong, but buyer beware considering the resource cost and upcoming banners. That does it for this video. Thanks for watching. We hope you found it helpful, and if you did, please give us a like and subscribe. We'll have more Genshin Impact boss guides and character reviews coming up, as well as some Exo Heroes content, so keep an eye out for that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.